Okay, I gotta say something about classes and what we're gonna be studying for quite a while here. Let me just open this briefly just to show you what we're in for. Now, we're pretty much here to the first class program. Okay, now all this shit is about classes, and it doesn't do a single goddamn interesting thing at all. It's all completely a bunch of useless console applications with gobbledygook fucking examples that are pointless and senseless, like I'm about to show you. And furthermore, a lot of this stuff is going to be the same thing. The only thing that's even remotely interesting is this Lotto application, which is a Windows application for lottery, and that doesn't involve classes at all. So, but it does involve Windows. But it's not until we get to Chili, that we start really seeing interesting applications in classes. Now, this is what really pisses me off about how C is taught these days. Um, you know, is, you know, applications like this. Okay, void bark. Woof. Set age. Age of my dog. Set weight of my dog. Set color. Okay, what do we do in a fucking database? And as it turns out, no! They don't recommend you use this for databases. But, the point is, and you really can't, I mean, this is just part of it. I mean, you actually could make a database this way if you use a pointer and a pointer array and memory. I mean, it's plausible anyway. But they don't even teach you anything that interesting. I mean, these fucking books are thicker than shit. Usually 800 pages or more long. They're just a bunch of boring, pointless console applications that never do anything useful or interesting. That's the crazy thing about it. I mean, it's just fucking ludicrous how they teach C++. And by the way, a lot of people too these days are actually C purists, and they won't touch C++. They don't touch OOP because they like being closer to the machine. That's why I like assembly language. It's nice and simple. And so is C. I mean, C is actually a real simple language. A lot of these purists won't even touch the standard C libraries. Or at least very sparingly. I mean, they like doing all their shit just straight up C. And you can do that. That's a great thing about C++, though, is it gives you the option to do it your way. So, I mean, you can, make full use of object-oriented programming, or you can totally ignore it and just do things in C. Because C is a subset of C++. But at any rate, I hate these boring bullshit applications. Yes, sure, they demonstrate the basic concepts of classes, but they do not at all substantiate why you should waste your fucking time learning classes. What is the value in it? Again, going through all these fucking books, this one and that big thick one, this one was, just a couple hundred pages, and then the big thick one was 800. Just a bunch of boring C++ console applications that never did anything useful, never did anything interesting, and frankly, it was a complete waste of goddamn time. Now, of course, back in the DOS days, how people would learn to program is, yeah, they'd have these boring books, but at least the applications were practical, because you weren't dealing with console applications, you were dealing with DOS applications. Okay, that's a little different, because then you can get right into graphics and stuff, so if you don't want to go through all the boring stuff, hell, just skip ahead, and study the graphics program examples and learn to program that way. Whatever you find interesting, skip to that. And that's how people used to learn about programming. They'd study a little bit of the boring stuff, but then jump into the cool stuff straight away. Well, these days you can't do that. Okay, so if you get these books these days that teach you C++, or even all the goddamn YouTube tutorials on fucking C++, they're all going to teach you the fucking boring way with consoles, and you'll never do a goddamn thing interesting. It's like learning algebra in high school. You're sitting there like, what's the fucking point of this? And honestly, there is no point to algebra unless you're a programmer. Okay, if you're a programmer, I've learned fucking basics of algebra, back when I was like fucking I don't know, 10 years old or 8 or 10 years old. Um, because yeah, it's really applicable, mathematics and algebra in particular when you start looking at programming. But again, it's only really applicable when we start using it for graphics and things like that. That's when it gets real interesting. Um, but the fact of the matter is back in the DOS days, yeah, you could do graphics. But here, no, they teach C++ independent of the operating system because they're, a bunch of assholes to some extent. But it's that C++ really is applicable to more than just Windows. But still, that's a fucking ridiculous semantic to jump into. That really is a political issue, not a practical issue. Because the fact of the matter is, they really need to teach it in the form that it'll be interesting to people sooner, not later. And that's the fallacy. Programming is not about politics. It's not about, oh, you got to learn it the hard way, so you can do it the good way. That's total bullshit. That does not test your mettle as a programmer. By boring you to death and seeing if you survive that does not test your mettle as a programmer. So, but again, back in the DOS days, yeah, you could just go right into the fucking good stuff if that's what you wanted to and learn it that way by looking at other people's programs and seeing how they work. Well, the problem is that's really difficult to do these days because of Windows. Okay, back in DOS, well, DOS was simple. I mean, that was hardly a factor. So you just deal with the graphics.h library, what the fuck ever, and you could just again dive right into the cool stuff. Here, now they separate, the teachers separate the goddamn Windows programming from C++. Well, that's hard to do, because honestly, they could do it. They could just jump in and say, hey, here's a fucking CLI Forms application, and let's throw some graphics on those forms. That's what they should do. And not worry about the particulars, and definitely not mess with MFC or any of that shit. Just jump into the cool stuff, so that people can start really putting it to use, and find it interesting. Because there's plenty of interesting things you can do with the programming. That's why Visual Basic is a little more interesting because you can do graphics, but plus you can make the forms applications too, which do something useful. The goddamn console application is totally useful. I don't care what platform you're in. It's totally useless. I don't care what platform you're on. It's a total waste of your goddamn time. And it's unbelievable they fucking still sell books and that people still watch videos like that, because you're not going to learn shit. In fact, you're going to be bored to death, or you're going to say, what's the point of all this class OOP shit? Because I did not understand the value of classes until I got to Chili stuff. And then I started seeing how powerful classes really were and what the point is. Because this dog, goes wolf. Your penguin is three inches tall, or 30 inches tall, or what the fuck ever. Who cares? It's a bunch of shit. Honestly, you're programming shit like that, you need to fucking shoot yourself, or going to a more interesting topic like accounting or something. I mean, the fact of the matter is, it's total bullshit. So, but that's just not the way to learn programming. It's just not the way to learn programming. And it does suck, because the thing I don't like about Chili is that, he tries to overly simplify things because he's assuming absolute beginners, but his approach is generally good. Bringing people into graphics. I just think that he, in some ways tries to be, too um, too meticulous. But there's a reason for it, and that's because he's trying to teach people DirectX programming eventually. And DirectX is actually a really primitive system. You would think that it would have like line and circle and cylinder and pyramid commands, but no, it doesn't. It's actually really primitive. That's why I know I'm not going to waste my time on it, because I'm not interested in, really developing video game engines. But you need to do all that shit yourself in DirectX, but I just assume have a higher level library, something that does it all for me, and so I don't worry about the minutia of trying to create my own pyramids or line functions or whatever. I'd rather use those line and pyramid functions, to produce something else more interesting. I'd like to concentrate on the actual goal instead of the the minutia of getting there. It's kind of silly. Um, so I don't know what to tell you except find a fucking API or wrapper or framework that has all that shit already done in it, and then focus on your application and cross your fingers that stuff's all written, in efficient code. But if you're going to program around Active or DirectX, I would definitely look for some kind of framework that's well developed and go with that and hope there's not a lot of bugs in it. And hope the authors of it keep it up when DirectX 79 comes out. But, to me, it's just not worth it. But yeah, I mean, it took a long time because, I can understand a couple of uses of classes. I was thinking, well, classes could be possibly theoretically good in a CAD program. Okay, we have line objects and square, rectangle objects and shit like that. In theory, they could be used that way, but do any of these programs demonstrate anything like that? No. So, the fact of the matter is that, again, I saw the first practical application in Chili's framework. So, um, planetchili.com or whatever. But the fact of the matter is that still, he's pretty good at what he does. I just, again, and I know why he's meticulous. It's just not really for me because I'm not trying to develop my own game engine. And I realize that ActiveX is not something I really care to learn, or DirectX is not something I care to learn because it's just not, there are no illusions going on, to 50, being almost 50 years old, that I'm going to, be writing the next great video game or anything like that, nor would I have to do it that way, even if that might be an outcome. So, again, a good framework is the best way to do it, and, don't worry about it. It's all good, as Chili would say. But, the fact of the matter is, though, is that, hopefully I can fast forward through a lot of this class shit, because a lot of it's kind of silly. There's only a few good points here, just like this. Okay, we got a class dog, and these are its private members because by default in a class, members are private, and as opposed to a structure in C++, the members are public, which is in contrast to C#, where structures are just plain old structures, and classes are classes. So, but in C++, structures are classes where by default the members are public instead of private. That's the only difference. Other than that, you can have functions in it, you can have, other classes in it, you can have, there's a bunch of shit going on, including inheritance and all that. But anyway, this is the first class section. These are the public members here. Those are the private members. We got a couple of some inline functions which are irrelevant. They can be inline, out of line, multi-line, what the fuck ever. Those functions accepting the setter method, setting, our private member variable age, equal to years. There's no constructor in this, so they're just using a default constructor. Set weight, that's another setter method. Set color, it's another setter method. Then we got our getter methods here. Get age, get white, get color. So this is giving outside access, through this interface to our private data members, and that's part of encapsulation. So it's about access control, and encapsulation is. We got an instance of our dog class declared in Fido. Because dog is a class, Fido is an object. Okay, so we made Fido an object of dog class. So Fido.setAge, Fido.setWeight, set weight. So here we're using our setter methods, and here we're using our getter methods. So that's really all this shows you, plus that one little function, member function, it had defined, which is best referred to as a method. And you can look at these as properties, and I like doing that a little bit because of my Visual Basic experience, because these correlate directly to properties and these correlate directly to methods. That bark function. So that's that. And let's see what's next on the roster. Open project. But we will get some interesting stuff in here on classes at some point. Let's see, class program 1. Okay, multiple class. Okay. Now, a class dog public section with setters in it and getters in it, and a bunch of shit commented out for reasons unknown. I had a tendency to do that. I didn't like erasing things while I was learning C, even when the book would tell you to change it or whatever. Okay, and then we got a function declared with the scope resolution operator, which is one of the member variables, and keep in mind I could have just declared this in this up here too. You do not have to have these functions separated. Usually these are put in a header file or in a CPP file. This is usually in a header file, a .h file. So, but there is a dog function in here somewhere, supposedly. Damn it. I see a bark function. Oh, set values. It's not a dog function, that's the class. And then set values is the function. So, yeah, set values right here. So this is replacing all that commented out code. That is, it's taking two integers, and in a declaration you do not have to name the integers at all because they're not used there, but they do have to be named here, as you can see. However, common practice is to have this look exactly the same as that, with the same variable names and everything, so it's easier to copy and paste and all that good shit. So, okay, and this is, interestingly enough, using the this pointer. So we're setting this .age, this .weight, and this .color, of our, base function there, our base class. So that gives us direct access to its members. That's kind of debating how necessary that is. I'd have to think about it. But this is a simple one too, though. So let's run it. Damn it. Okay, so that's what it does. That's what it says. So, read it and weep. That really is not showing you much. So, because like I said, I don't know how often I use the this pointer, but usually I have a this file, a header file and a CPP file. This is usually declared in the header file, and the header file is included in the CPP file. So usually you don't have to use the this pointer when you're actually doing function calls like this. So I'm a little surprised that you would need to do that here. Oh, well, they're the same name. Oh, that's why. Because they're the same name. These are and this is bad practice. Naming a variable the same name as our private member variables, or a member variables period, is not good. So this is setter, and we got int age, int weight, int color, as the ability to set it. But this should be like, int age 2, weight 2, color 2, some different name than the actual variable. Then you wouldn't have to use this pointer, because this clears up the ambiguity having two names the same. So otherwise, normally you wouldn't need to do this. Even in this case, you wouldn't need to do this, with without a dot header file or whatnot. So that's what that's basically showing you. So anyway, but there are times when you do need this for other reasons. So anyway.